you're dead. That part is already over. But in ancient Egypt, dying was never the end of the story. It was the beginning of the most important journey you would ever take. And whether you'd survive that journey came down to something brutally simple: money. Because the elaborate process you've heard about, the 70 days, the natron, the golden masks, that was a luxury, and luxuries had a price. So lie still on the cooling board and listen, because what was about to happen to your body depended entirely on what your family could pay, and the cheapest option was a kind of horror all its own. Understand first what was actually at stake, because to the Egyptians, this was not about vanity or sentiment. They believed you were made of more than flesh. You had a ka, a life force, and a bi, something like your personality, your soul, and these pieces needed somewhere to return to. They needed your body, preserved, recognizable, intact, as an anchor in the world of the living. Let the body rot, and the soul had no home to come back to. No home, no eternity. You would simply be unmade. So mummification was not decoration. It was survival after death. And survival, then, as now, was not free. There were, broadly, 3 ways your corpse could be handled, and the Greek travelers who wrote about Egypt laid them out like items on a menu, because that is essentially what they were. The embalmers would show the grieving family the options and the prices, and the family would choose what they could bear to spend on the dead. If you were wealthy, you got the full ritual, the one that made the mummies in the museums. We'll save the gorgeous, gruesome details of that for another day. Just know it was slow, sacred, and staggeringly expensive, reserved for those who could afford to buy their way into eternity in style. Drop down to the middle option, and the process got colder and cleverer. No careful surgery here. Instead, the embalmers took an oil, often cedar oil, and injected it into the body through the back passage, then plugged it so nothing could escape. The body was laid in natron salt to dry. And here's the quiet horror of the middle tier. That oil sat inside you and slowly dissolved your insides into liquid. When the drying was done, they simply unplugged you and let the oil pour back out, carrying your liquefied organs with it. No incision, no ceremony for your guts, just a body emptied out from the inside and rinsed clean like a bottle. Cheaper, faster, and far less dignified than the rich man's death. But you came here for the bottom, the option for the poor. So take a breath, because this is where eternity got very thin. Picture the scene where this choice was made, because it's grim in a way the museums never show. Your grieving family, standing in the embalmer's workshop amid the smell of natron and resin and decay, while a man calmly presents little wooden models of the dead at 3 price points and waits for them to decide how much your soul is worth. Imagine choosing eternity for someone you loved, the way you'd choose a coffin's trim today, and knowing that the cheaper you went, the worse their odds in the world to come. Families went into debt for this. They sold what little they owned, because the thing waiting below the cheapest option was almost too frightening to accept. The cheapest method the embalmers offered was almost insultingly simple. They would purge the body, clean out the belly with a simple wash, dry it in natron, and hand it back. No precious oils, no fine linen, no removal of the organs with care, no canopic jars, no spells whispered over each step. It was the discount funeral, the bare minimum to call it embalmed at all, the kind of send-off a working family might just barely scrape together. Your body would be preserved technically. Whether the gods would be impressed was another matter entirely. And below even that, below the cheapest paid option was the truth that most Egyptians actually lived and died with. They couldn't afford the embalmers at all. Not the rich man's ritual, not the middle tier, not even the discount purge. For the vast majority of people in ancient Egypt, the farmers, the laborers, the servants, professional mummification was as far out of reach as a palace. So what happened to them? They went into the sand, and here is the strange, almost eerie twist at the heart of this whole story. The poor were buried directly in the desert in simple shallow pits, wrapped in a mat or a bit of cloth if they were lucky, with maybe a pot or two beside them. No tomb, no embalmers, no ritual. And the desert, indifferent and merciless, did the embalmer's job for free. The sand of Egypt is blisteringly hot and bone dry, and a body laid in it loses its moisture fast, before decay can take hold. The skin tightens and leathers over the bones. The body dries out and stops rotting. The poor, who could pay nothing, were naturally mummified by the land itself, sometimes preserved better than the wealthy, whose expensive resins and oils could actually accelerate decay if something went wrong. In fact, this is almost certainly how the Egyptians learned about preservation in the first place. Long before the priests and the natron and the 70-day ritual, people dug graves in the sand and later found the dead staring back at them, dried and intact, looking eerily alive. The whole towering cult of mummification, the obsession that defined a civilization, may have begun with poor people in shallow desert graves, accidentally kept by the sand. So you'd think the poor got lucky, a free mummy from the desert, no fortune required. Don't be comforted. Here's why that natural preservation was a curse dressed as mercy. A body in a shallow desert pit is not safe. It has no deep tomb, no stone, no seal, nothing standing between it and the jackals that dug through the sand to get at the dead. Which is exactly why the Egyptians pictured the god of embalming as a jackal, the animal they kept finding among their graves. Your preserved body could be torn apart, scattered, devoured. And remember what the body was for. It was the anchor your soul needed to return to. Scatter the body, and you scatter the person's last chance at eternity. The desert kept you, and then it fed you to the dogs. And the worst part? It wasn't only about the flesh. The rich didn't just buy better preservation, they bought the words, the spells, the prayers, the names of the gods spoken correctly, the protective amulets, the Book of the Dead, scrolls to guide the soul past the monsters of the underworld. That entire instruction manual for surviving death was a product, and the poor couldn't afford it. So a poor Egyptian faced the most dangerous journey imaginable, through a dark world full of gates and demons and a final judgment, with none of the maps, none of the passwords, none of the protection that the wealthy were buried clutching. You were sent into eternity, preserved by accident and armed with nothing, while the rich man floated past you on a river of paid-for prayers. That was the real inequality of ancient Egypt. Not just who ate well or lived in a fine house, but who got to exist forever and who simply, quietly stopped. The pharaohs and the nobles bought their way into a golden eternity. The people who built their tombs and grew their food went into the sand, kept by the heat, guarded by nothing, and left to face the gods alone. So the next time you see a glittering museum mummy behind glass, remember the millions you'll never see. The ones the desert took for free and then slowly took back. In Egypt, even death had a price of admission, and most people were buried just outside the gate. If this pulled back a curtain, you weren't quite ready to look behind. Stay close, because the further you go into how the Egyptians treated their dead, the stranger and darker the path becomes.